you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love, because you're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a knife, just to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, and today is Freewheeling Friday. All right, so in a nutshell, before we get into, I'm going to try to make this as and I hate using the word layman, but it is complicated stuff, and I'm going to try to make it as uncomplicated as I absolutely can. All right. I was debating whether or not I even really wanted to do that today, that I even wanted to do it at all, because it's so weedsy, all right? But I think it's important, and I'll give you the backstory on that before we get into it. But it has to deal with reporting, all right, questions or criticisms even, when it comes to the reporting of adverse effects to the VAERS system, which is the Vaccination Adverse Effects Reporting System. It's archaic. The field has been at the CDC and the FDA for many, many, many years about how badly this system is run and how much better it could be improved. We found a ton of literature on this, and we found a ton of literature pre-pandemic about different essentially, different, their equations, different ways to be able to report adverse effects, to be able to throw what are called signals that tell you whether a vaccine has an impact or an issue of some sort, okay? But we'll get into that in a second, all right? Let's speak first a word about Joe Biden's approval rating. All right, so I was just on Bannon's, all right, and War Room, and we talked about a Biden's approval rating. Since I only have a quick segment there, let me elaborate on what I'm saying here, all right? The CNBC poll is now a week or two behind other people who are a week or two behind us, showing you what was inevitable, and that is the decline of Joe Biden's approval rating. It was inevitable for this very simple reason. The only reason Joe Biden's overall general approval rating, are we kidding, was decent was because of the appearance. I'm not even going to say that it was true. The appearance that he was handling the pandemic better than the previous president. All right, here's the problem with that. Joe Biden was handed, and this comes from the vaccine. All of that perception stemmed from the vaccination rollout. People feeling, now that the vaccine's out, I'm safer. We're all going to be safer. And guess what? We can go back to normal. They did not want to go back to lockdowns. They did not want to go back to mask mandates. When we were, and if I say it wrong, Laura, let me know. When we were polling for the Epoch Times, all right, before the election in 2020, even we, folks, were finding very large percentages of Americans, registered voters, who supported a nationwide mask mandate. That is no longer the case. It is not the case anymore. We, even earlier than that, found people who said, I get it, we have to lock it down. That is no longer the case. When they say, I'm worried about another variant of COVID, they're not saying they're worried about the same things they were worried about 2 years ago almost. They're saying, oh no, not again. I thought Joe Biden told us that he was going to do this better than Donald Trump. And here is why I say it's inevitable. And before I move into that, keep in mind he was negative on every other issue. Even on the economy, when there was $3,000 to $7,000 stimulus checks hitting people's banks, we never had more than plus a few points. One time, he was positive on the economy. One time. He was negative from January all the way up until our last polling was conducted. He was negative on the economy every single time except for one. He's negative on foreign policy. He's negative on U.S.-China relations. He's negative on immigration. Yet he was positive generally and positive on COVID. That's it. If I have to further explain that to you, then maybe you shouldn't observe polls. I don't know what to tell you. Then you're not getting it. But I know my audience gets it. They got it. So none of this is a surprise to them. It was inevitable because Joseph R. Biden and the shills in the media, let's be honest. When we say Joe Biden, who are we talking about? Ron, the people around him, Klain, and the people around him. Joe isn't really saying much, right? He's saying what he's told to say. He promised that he would handle the pandemic better than Donald J. Trump. He was handed first of all, he was handed the vaccination program by Donald J. Trump. He was handed the trajectory to meet the vaccination goal by Donald J. Trump. He failed to meet that goal. He failed to stop the variants. Folks, he made an impossible promise. No president, no man can command virus particles. The goal originally was to prevent the hospitals and the healthcare system from imploding, from becoming overburdened. The goal was never to stop infections. But because they moved the goalpost, after Donald Trump did rise to the occasion of hospitalization overwhelm, when he did rise to that, they had to move the goalposts. They did this to themselves. They set an impossible bar. And frankly, the entire proposition was ludicrous from the start. Joseph R. Biden is the same man who was thrown off of Barack Obama's H1N1 task force. The former beloved president of the United States threw Joseph R. Biden off the H1N1 task force because he was incompetent. because he made ridiculous statements that incited public fear, because he made 11% of the vaccination target in 6 months. That's Joe Biden. So the proposition that this man, this guy, was going to come in and do it any better than Donald J. Trump was ludicrous on its face. It was a mass-pushed media lie. It was propaganda. And eventually, reality always wins. Joe Biden does not have the power to command Delta variants. Joe Biden does not have the power to stop the spread of viral particles. Joe Biden doesn't have the managerial experience that Donald J. Trump had. Donald Trump was far more capable of handling this pandemic. That's the truth. Joe Biden hasn't done anything executive in his entire life. His entire life. That's the truth. So it was inevitable that the problems with COVID would continue. In fact, all of that science he listened to, which we're going to get in and talk to today, this is why I tell Team Trump, don't take credit for this vaccine. Don't do it. There's a greater risk here than there is a reward. Because what we're going to find out is that many of the recommendations was not good advice. And in fact, we're probably going to see issues that we didn't have to see if we would have went with the muted voices of dissent who were pushed out of public debate. And here we are. And also, the economy, it's important to understand, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week. GDP was expected to grow at least twice the rate that we saw this last quarter under Joe Biden had Donald Trump remained in office. So now we have voters going, damn, we don't have the raging economy. And we still have coronavirus and problems with coronavirus. We're facing potentially more lockdowns. Didn't Donald Trump say in that debate that all of this, the very offended pundits, when were outraged over in the first debate, didn't Donald Trump turn to Joe Biden and say, Joe, don't lie. Don't lie, Joe. You're going to lock us back down. So, if you're a bubble person and you're incapable of seeing the entire picture that I just laid out for you, and you're still wondering in this state of shock why Joe Biden is falling, then again, pop your bubble. This is not hard. You made an impossible promise you could not keep. Things are not going as well as the public would have expected them to go under Donald Trump. How do we know that? I'm not saying anything these aren't statements of opinion. These are statements of fact. This is why we started the Registered Voter Economic Confidence Index. The percentage right now who have a positive feeling toward the economy is the lowest it's been since Barack Obama took the reins during the Great Depression, after the Great Depression. Great Recession, excuse me. People haven't felt this badly about their economic prospects since Joe Biden was vice president. It's not good. It is not good. They're choosing to focus on everything that voters don't care about, everything that voters oppose, and they're in this really bad catch-22 right now where they know COVID was the only thing they had going for them, yet if they keep up the COVID issue, it's going to harm them politically anyway. So we now have pollsters who had Joe Biden at 62%, at 48%, at 46%, 47%. What can I tell you, folks? It never gets old being ahead of everybody else. What can I tell you? This was highly predictable and inevitable. The ADP jobs report out on Wednesday was a fart. The government report, I don't know, maybe, a little bit a little bit more bright spot. But, I mean, there are some I could point out. But the bottom line is, this is not the growth we thought we would have seen. And it's certainly not the growth we need. And all of the wage data, it's again this month, is because the likes of people like Chef Andrew Cuomo were right. When you have to pay a dishwasher $25 an hour to get the hell back to work, it distorts wage data. We hadn't seen 3% or greater wage growth since the third quarter of 2008, before the Great Recession really took it out. Took wages below 3% on an annualized basis monthly. Donald Trump comes in, passes the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and wage growth is 3% or greater for 22 consecutive months until the pandemic, has a blip for 2 months, and goes back to being strong and across the board. Not because of distortions, but because 50% of the construction industry came back in the first month we turned on the valve again. 20% of the manufacturing industry came back in the first month we turned the valve again. But we were going to create problems with long-term unemployment with the policy that we adopted. And by the way, that's on Trump. Much of that is on Trump. He signed the CARES Act. He got the ball rolling with that. I understand it wasn't really politically viable, but hell, I'll tell you what. If I was president, I think I would have went to the microphone, Laura, and I would have said, listen, America, do you want to create long-term unemployment? You want to go back to the era of Jimmy Carter? This guy is going to be Jimmy Carter without the base. I'm serious. He's going to be Jimmy Carter without the base. We haven't seen a president who doesn't have a base in a very long time. Even George W. Bush, who had myriad problems until the post-surge, leading up to the Great Recession period, that's when his base abandoned him. It took him that long to do so. But once the white evangelical base started to drift away from George W. Bush, he fell into the 30s and kept falling. Joe Biden doesn't have a damn base. No matter what you saw with Donald Trump's approval ratings, people, the headlines, historic lows. He also had a historically high floor. He was just like Barack Obama. You could not push Obama in the 30s. Couldn't do it. Too many people loved him. Same thing with Donald Trump. A lot of people hated him, but too many people loved him. The polls that were in the 30s were garbage. They're also the polls that showed you a majority wanted him impeached. Well, if that's true, then how the hell did he get 75 million votes for re-election? Because it wasn't true. Never was. You call the Bill Kristol Republican in Metro US, you may think 25% of Republicans actually want the guy impeached. Problems from the jump here. The bottom line is you could not push Donald Trump into the 30s because too many people loved him. He had what's called a base. And it was a base among whom he was beloved. Barack Obama, the same thing. A lot of people hated him, but he had a base, and among whom he was beloved. Joe Biden has nothing. He's the great unremarkable. Even when we had Donald Trump and Joe Biden in the low 40s of approval, we still saw 30-something% routinely say, I strongly approve. If he had 45% approval, 4 in 10 said they strongly approved. 5% would say, I somewhat approve. Very similar pattern with Barack Obama. Now, the difference between Trump and Obama is that people liked Trump's policies. They didn't like Trump. Many, on the flip side of that, liked Barack Obama, but they didn't like his policies. That's the difference, which was the invert. And with Joe Biden, they don't like his policies, and they don't like Joe Biden. What they liked was inherited from the prior administration. That's it. When it comes to Joe Biden, do you strongly approve or strongly? it is not uncommon for the strongly to be in the 20s. What was in the last post? Like 23%. Folks, viewers, go look. You tell me. I think it was about 23%. That's it. All right, so, and then the rest is, I somewhat approve. Let me fix my headset here. I somewhat approve. If you somewhat approve of somebody, you can somewhat disapprove of them the next month. That is soft support. And it always was like that with Joe Biden. Never did 42% say I strongly approve of Joe Biden. The great unremarkable. That's what we called him before the election. That's what we called him after the election. Because that's what the polling numbers showed. He was just Joe Biden. Who I think the media told us such bad things about how Donald Trump handled this pandemic. I mean, he's got to be able to do it better than Joe Biden. He just has to. Reality always wins. Reality always wins. Right, boss baby?
Yes.
Come on, boss baby. Give daddy a little boss baby. Boss baby. You ever see a little 2-year-old jumping up and down going, boss baby, boss baby, boss baby, boss baby, boss baby. It's so cute. So cute. Oh, yeah. It's going to be bring your baby to work week. Not day. Week. Right, Laura?
Yes.
That's just the way it is. He can be a little bit distracting even for me, so I do apologize if he is.
We're training the future pundit.
Yeah, we're just training him. You got to see him sitting in the desk. He's like, I'm the people's pundit, fool. I'm in charge here.
And then he smashes all your keys.
And then he smashes the keys, yeah.
And changes my framing.
All right, well, look, with that in mind, let's get in. Now it's 11:22 already. We got Don Smith on from the Don Smith Show coming up a little bit later. We'll do our Q&A. What else is on the agenda today before I get into this? Because I have to give them the whole backstory. And I will preface this by saying, listen, I am not an expert in the vaccine adverse effects reporting system. I am, not somebody exactly who has done this for a living before. I'm coming at this from a strictly mathematical point of view, statistical point of view, and I'm just telling you what I think looking at it. He's running around laughing.
And running.
All right, so let's give the backstory first. A couple of weeks ago, as you all know, if you have been following for a while, obviously, I have pretty good sources in this area. And from the beginning, let's back it all the way up. And let's back it up to Moderna's claim that their efficacy was 99%. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And right away, we had people ringing the phone saying that's not true. And in fact, the FDA knows that's not true because of what's called the adverse monitoring system, blah, 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 right? And that's when I was really first introduced to how this works. All right, so whatever. The efficacy rates in question, if you notice the fact checkers, they'll always say that, 99% of people who got the vaccine weren't hospitalized. But of course, that's not how these studies are conducted, ladies and gentlemen. They're not conducting vaccination trials to see the vaccine's ability to keep you out of the hospital. The claims were to prevent infections. All right? Yeah, you may have to just deal with that. This isn't going to work. The claims were the prevention of infections, not hospitalizations. Okay? 1 second. The end of an era. Anyway, and so you'll even see when Alex Berenson's on Twitter and he talks about efficacy rates and then Twitter slaps him with the tag, they're not actually using fact checks that are relevant to those claims because that is about infections. And currently, the CDC just told us that they are investigating those efficacy claims when it comes to infections. They only stood by the hospitalizations. Well, that's irrelevant. That's completely irrelevant. And that started us to look into, is that claim even true? Along with claims like 99.1% of those who were infected are unvaccinated. That alone just sounds like a dubious claim, all right? Given what we know from this reporting system. All right, and I'm going to take a risk here. I hope it doesn't disconnect anything, but that got us also looking into the amount of deaths that may be reported. All right, and what do I mean by that? I mean, these are what are called serious adverse effects, SAEs, and or deaths that are being reported, or well, if they die, first of all, they're being reported as COVID deaths. They're not being reported as vaccination deaths. That's number one. And number two, that why does serious adverse effects matter? I'll put it into the comment section below. I have here in front of me Pfizer's actual trial studies. And what we see in the vaccination adverse effects reporting system is a serious discrepancy between what we would expect because of Pfizer, for instance, their own reported incidents of adverse effects, serious adverse effects, versus what the data from VAERS is telling us. And it is, this is another disclaimer, all right? And by the way, deaths now, I just refreshed it, are up to 12,366. That's an important number, and keep it in mind, all right? Permanent disability, 14,251. Bottom line, we're looking at a total of 650,836. That is, if we were just going to use Pfizer's own reports when they submitted, and you have to submit all of this for emergency use authorization. If you just look at Pfizer's own percentages of people that suffered an adverse effect and or death even, we're looking at now about 27 to 1. And I got to hat tip somebody real quick, because this, as I'm going through all of this, all right, and I'll give you guys all of these studies. Eric Huntley from Unstructured, sends me this thing to look at, all right, and it's defining away vaccine safety signals, and it's written by a guy named Matthew Crawford on, he writes for roundingtheearth.substack.com. And so I've been spending like a week sending this out, asking people to refute it. Again, I don't do this for a living. So I'm asking people who may be in the field who are also statisticians, can you explain why PRR is being used? And PRR is proportionate reported ratio. And it's a function, folks. When it's to determine whether or not a vaccine is displaying so many adverse effects that it's throwing what's called a signal. So it will tell you, this vaccine is significantly less safe than this vaccine. Vaccine A is significantly less safe than vaccine B. And so far, I haven't received a response that I find to be sufficient. Or sources that I have gone back to who originally brought us claims. And the claims are this, folks, that the data is being misinterpreted and that it's being misreported. And that people have known that there is a problem with PRR for a very long time. And in fact, if you go through Matthew Crawford's research or his writings, he did some research on it too. He found about 3 studies. We found more that show that people have been complaining about this for a very long time. So it really does beg the question, why did the CDC and others, when they know and have been, beat at by professionals in the field for many years, their complaints range from PRR is the most insensitive reporting method or methodology to use to report to VAERS. There are numerous alternatives that have been put forward. So they chose the least sensitive way to report adverse effects, right? And what do I mean by least sensitive? you could throw in ridiculously high variables into the function and it still won't move the needle that much if you're comparing COVID vaccine A to COVID vaccine B. To put it as simple as I can, it appears, somebody who does math, it appears that you wanted to use this equation because you were looking for insensitivity. You wanted it to not throw a signal. All right? And I'm trying to get into this. I will give you guys these links, and then especially on locals, we're going to talk about this a little bit more because I have to do a dance here on YouTube. And I have to keep saying things like, you know what? I'm open to explanations because, of course, I don't do this for the CDC for a living. The problem is that we bring these takes back to sources who originally came to us with these whistles of something's not right here, this isn't right, this shouldn't be done. The amount of Americans that are even being reported, and I get some of it is just too low, and I get some of the criticisms that you have to try to get out some of the noise. So people are hearing from the media that this may not be safe. They saw on social media that might not be safe. So it has to be designed not to throw false positives, to throw false signals, to not even throw them, but to not elevate them or weight them significantly, because then it will make a vaccine look like it's not safe when in fact it is. I get that. I do. However, they added this conditional onto PRR, which is already insensitive. And this conditional is a red flag. And this is what the point of what Matthew Crawford is writing. And the only way to really understand what he's doing is to take examples, plug them into a table, and just, you don't even need to be a statistician to do it. You could do it on Google Sheets. And Google Sheets has some really complicated formulas. You could actually allow Google to do it for you just to make sure you don't do anything wrong, or at least much of it. And you will see that you could put in outrageous numbers of adverse effects into some of these into PR, and it will still not really throw a signal because of how the CDC decided to define really what is a signal. All right, so that's I'm not going to weigh everybody down in the weeds right off the jump. I wanted to lay a foundation because we're going to sit on this for a while, guys. Perhaps somebody will see the video and come to me and say, you know what, Rich? Here, let me show you why this is done that way. The problem is we have people that we are talking to in this field and have been doing vaccine development for many, many years. And so if you're some, I don't know, family medicine doctor, as one example, who gets back to me and says, here's why you're wrong. 3 paragraphs of condescending nonsense that don't address the arithmetic. Then I don't really care. I mean, that's just because you're a doctor or practices family medicine does not mean you even understand why this is done this way. My concern, and I think everybody's concerned, it's not because pre-COVID, there were a lot of medical professionals and a lot of people in that field who couldn't understand why this was even still in this archaic system. So here we have a global pandemic and nobody addresses what people have known for years to be not imperfect. I'm not saying it's not imperfect. It's imperfect's not the word. Incorrect is the word. Dangerous is the word. All right, and so I wanted to lay that as a foundation because moving forward, we are going to actually show you examples, and we'll make them very, very easy. So you don't have to be, you could be like an art teacher and still understand it. I mean, this is not, honestly, what goes into it is more difficult. But the actual, doing it and putting it on paper and being able to look at it and see, okay, I can see how this can result in what's called masking. And masking is when You're looking for a cute little methodology to be able to hide these signals, or not even hide them, but make them seem insignificant when they're in fact not. So for the last 3 or 4 days, we've been looking through some of the other reports to see if this entire process was too insensitive, and if we weren't being told about some of these adverse effects because of the way it's by design, then we should see some disparities in what the vaccine developers themselves found and what is now being reported in the public. Now that the public is taking the vaccine. And without a doubt, that's there. So I just read to you how many adverse effects so far have been recorded, and there are significant delays in the reporting to the FDA and others. There are, or the National Vaccine Information Center is where I'm getting this from right now. There are significant delays in the VAERS system. I get that. But we're looking at we're millions shy. We're millions of adverse effects shy if we just looked at how many people took the Pfizer vaccine. How many estimated people have been vaccinated with the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine? And if Pfizer is telling us, they had 0.7, then we should see that in the public, or at least we should see a system that's trying to catch up to that kind of number. And we are not. So that's, in my mind, that's another red flag that something's being masked. All right, so that's the foundation of the conversation. And I'm not going to, I had to just lay that out first and just let you know that, again, if you are familiar with what I am talking about and you think you have an explanation, then I would love to hear it. Please send it to Laura and we will review it. Please add sources. Don't put these nonsense links like we've been getting lately. I don't care about links to the news media. The whole point of what I am saying is that the news media, probably they're not smart enough to understand what's going on, and they're just copy and pasting press releases at this point from the government, from various government agencies. They're not being journalists and doing the research. So a real journalist would go to somebody, let's say, who does algorithms on Wall Street for Jamie Dimon or something, and he would, or somebody who has those skills and have applied them to VAERS. But we're not seeing that. So don't send me an article to Forbes or CNN or the Washington Post or something with some expert quoted in it about why it is that way. I want literature. Literature. Because so far, the amount that you could find, guys, if you just do a search yourself, the amount of literature you could find criticizing PRR is through the roof. I haven't even gotten through it yet. I told Laura yesterday, if I was going to get through it, I would have had to do nothing for the rest of the day. And just read that. No polling, no show prep, no nothing. All right, so, if you have that, it's legit. Don't send me some tantrum. I'm dying to hear it. If you know somebody in the field, by all means, invite them to respond to me. Because I'm trying to be careful here and I'm trying to be responsible. But this is really making me nervous. Why? Because I'm not like others. I don't assume the innocent explanation. When there is this much money involved, when there are these many reputations on the line, and generally, any time something comes from a hall of power, this is the media's role, they're supposed to view that with skepticism and verify it. And when you find something that appears to be intentional and sinister, you don't assume incompetence. You assume the worst. The burden is on the powers that be to convince you otherwise or to prove otherwise. And so far, by the way, the CDC will not do that. They will not do that. For me, if it was me, there are enough people, because apparently I found out there are quite a few people looking at this now. There are enough of us. The CDC should recognize they have a serious problem here. If we're all wrong, then great. Hold like a Facebook kind of like town hall for us and explain. Just make, a few invites. Or not even Facebook, a Zoom. What are we talking about? A handful of people, maybe 20 people, who then can go listen to what you have to say. And if it's legit, we'll fan out and qualm the fear. And say, you know what? I understand where you're coming from. I saw it too. I don't know why they're using this. I thought they were masking signals too. But that's not happening. And by the way, the lack of response when it comes to something that can have this much of an impact, don't you think they should be on it quicker? When people's health, it's a question of people's health, even life and death. All right. Okay. So with that in mind, that's my very first plea. And then next week, starting with On What Are the Odds, we will start showing you some actual real world figures. And probably on locals, I'll probably start to do that before. But for the YouTube community, and again, I'm doing this with the sole hope that, or not even, that's not true. I'm doing this with an open mind, and of course I am hoping that somebody can provide legitimate explanations that make sense to me. But I'm also doing it because I really hope what I fear is going on is not going on. I really hope not. This would be a breach of trust, because now we're not talking about people's views and their opinions, so they lie about that all the time. They lie to try to persuade you about something all the time. That's just part of the game. That's information warfare. The intelligence community is abusing your trust, telling you your former president is an asset of Vladimir Putin's. That's egregious. I know. I get it. But it still doesn't hurt your personal well-being. It doesn't harm your body. It doesn't harm your family. It doesn't harm your lifespan. It doesn't, This would be something else. This would be something else. A whole nother level of, oh my God. I can't believe they did this. All right. And by the way, let me put the Pfizer thing into the locals community. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to put the Pfizer thing into the locals community. The study is based off of, because of course, don't you think dosages should matter? How do you count for dosages? And I don't want to get like I'm giddy to get into it. Even though I don't want to do what Laura warned about, which is sometimes I call it a deep dive, right? And Laura says, yeah, sometimes you take people down, deep dive, and drown them. So I'm trying to move slowly here, but there's no way to factor for age differences. There's no way to factor for dosages. I mean, it's just nuts. And the CDC won't even clear up very simple questions like, is anybody simply comparing COVID vaccine A to COVID vaccine B and COVID vaccine C and COVID vaccine D? Or is it being compared to the entire universes of vaccines? I get it's supposed to be a relative system. I get that. That still doesn't seem like a legitimate system. I don't know. So I don't want to get into it before. But there's locals. There is what was submitted to the FDA from Pfizer. Okay, so you need to know this before we get into whether or not adverse effects, especially severe adverse effects, are being underreported. Because we would expect significantly higher numbers. And this is why does any of this matter? If even deaths are being masked as COVID deaths, I'm saying vaccine deaths being masked as COVID deaths, we have a serious problem with this. This is what I've been saying all along. Where is the financial incentive? Which classification is literally being rewarded right now? I mean, there's just so much. It's like, why would people do this, Rich? They wouldn't do this. I beg to differ. Especially if there's money in it. Lots of money. What do the politicians get, Rich? Well, money. They get money. They get compliance. They get obedience. They get to take another inch off that ruler of liberty. What are you talking about, guys? I mean, some of the reactions have been naive at best. All right. Anyway, that's 38,000 approximately participants that were greater than 16 years of age. All right. Older than 16 years old. All right. So yeah, we absolutely take a look at that because we're going to dive into that next week. Or again, when it comes to locals, probably a little bit earlier. I'm going to start putting up some tables. Maybe I'll put them on Google Sheets so you can look at them. And if there's a way for me to put functions into the cells that do, the arithmetic for us, then this way it just simplifies it. But I'll also show you what they are supposed to be. And then maybe I'll give you the ability to play around with some of them. And then you'll see what I mean. So it really doesn't matter whether or not you put some ludicrous number of adverse effects into the function. It still won't make it. It still wouldn't raise the level of throwing a signal. And that's really a serious problem. And then also, we would respect some degree of underreporting, of course, because not everybody, and that's why I said specifically severe adverse effects, because we don't expect everybody, folks, to go and report a minor headache. We don't expect everybody to go and report minor nausea. There are going to be some people who feel a little bit ill and then just move on with their lives. So to at least some extent, we would expect there to be a disparity between what Pfizer, Moderna, whatever self-reported trial adverse effect they self-reported in their trials versus what we see now that the public has it. But 3-fold, 2.5-fold now? I don't know about that. That sounds a little crazy. And it's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. That really is just an indicator to me whether or not the original allegation, which is that the vaccine adverse effect reporting system is being misinterpreted and that we're using methods that are really intentionally designed to be insensitive, to tolerate more reports. All right? Maybe I'm putting that. Again, I'm trying to you guys are smart group. I know I don't have to, layman it. All right? All right, so check that out first. That's our baseline, guys, for the very first conversation. Then you'll understand what I'm talking about. All right? And yeah, I'm liking this idea about putting a spreadsheet up, a public spreadsheet that we could look at together. And I think that instead of showing you graphics on the show, I'm liking that idea much, much better. What do you guys think? I'm looking at your comments right now. I didn't see Peak Prosperity's breakdown, but anybody who has anything like that, please send it to me, and I, of course, will absolutely research it. Did you guys see the study I posted on your locals the other day of someone evaluating the VAERS database, finding a ton of deaths reported as COVID deaths, despite never having a positive COVID test? I didn't, but Appalachia, I will go back and find it from you, or you could post it here right now just to make my life a little bit easier. But again, that's right on the money here. And in fact, I may have reviewed that already. I didn't see what you posted, but when you post it, or I go back and look at what you posted, it may have been something I did in fact review already, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? So you're right on, you're right over the target, Appalachia. You're right over the target, all right? Because there is also a problem with how we incentivize the public health sector to deal with this pandemic. It goes all the way back to whether or not... Laura, can I even bring up the results of the test? Do you object to this at all whatsoever? All right. So, for instance, when you give people a chance to exploit something, they're going to exploit it. I tell you this all the time. It doesn't matter whether it has to do with elections, electioneering, or anything. That's why we have laws, because people will exploit when you give them the opportunity. And it's the laws of nature, folks. Just the other day, I got the bill for the kid, the young one, when he was sick, and they wanted to test him for COVID. Now, of course, the COVID test is free, and the federal government gave money to the states to test for COVID. So instead, what did they do? They double billed us for pneumonia testing and influenza testing, right? We didn't even see it. What do you get? You get a medical bill, you pay a medical bill, and that's it. The line item where the influenza was done, I thought originally this is a perfectly good explanation. It's another strain of influenza. It was not. The code was COVID test. So they billed the government for the COVID test, and then they billed me for it and marked it down as influenza. So, again, when you incentivize people to be bad, they will be bad. That's a sad reality of human nature. Henry Morgenthau, folks, Henry Morgenthau. Let's go back to the basics. It's a sad reality of human nature that we always should take into consideration when we're looking at public policy and we're formulating public policy. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about public health, economics, electioneering. You always have to be realistic about how our nature is. You know, you give people a chance to use change of address flag, absentee ballots, they'll do it. You give them a chance to sit on their butts and take pandemic assistance instead of going back to their job, they'll do it.
Use your favorite analogy about sitting at the bar.
That's right.
Next to a known...
If you sit down at the bar, have a couple drinks, next to a known car thief, and you get up and leave the bar and leave your keys on the bar next to him or her, when you come back after taking a leak from the bathroom, your keys in your car will be gone. I mean, it's really that simple. It really is that simple. And it is time to read. I love that comment. It is time to read. Alright, so just to refresh to make sure I didn't say anything wrong here, let me refresh the National Information Center. 12,366. That is the latest number. And that is the latest number of deaths. And sadly, again, not that I'm over here cheerleading for a higher number, but the bottom line is, when you look at how many people have been vaccinated versus what we're seeing in these severe adverse effect reports, it would very much appear that they are underreported. Very much. All right? Which I think we should talk about first before we get into whether or not I don't know that we can answer the question of whether this is intentional or this is just... I mean, I always lean to one way. I always look for the nefarious explanation. But I think first it's important to look around at some of these other numbers that would be basically red flags if it was indeed the fact that this is by design. That underreporting itself is by design. All right? Or a general attempt to make something look safer than it is. All right? And for all those, reporters out there, click reporters, I'm reporting him for misinformation. Again, you could do that. Or you could help us all understand where I may be wrong here. And we are very much open to literature. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I wanted to lay that as a foundation for this discussion, which we're going to be hammering all next week. And when we come back, we will be talking to Don Smith. We'll hold our Q&A, but I'll also speak a little more about this when we come back from the break. We're not going to start this weekend actually in the field, but the Public Polling Project had a very good week as far as being funded. I have every confidence that we will be fully funded by the time the weekend rolls around next weekend, and that we absolutely can get in the field next weekend. And the point of this one, we will be oversampling DC a little bit, although I really don't think we need to do any more with the costs. We'll just, I think we'll be fine. Oversample DC a little bit, and we will show the difference. I loved Robert's idea. Other people were pointing it out too. Show the difference between, what's the word? Not preoccupation. The word. It's not preoccupation. Predisposition towards the January 6th political prisoners. All right. Do you think, they're guilty of this? And the point is to show whether or not they can even get justice, a fair hearing, a fair trial, a fair anything in the District of Columbia versus the rest of the country. So we're going to measure the difference in sentiment, public sentiment, specifically the predisposition they have toward these people, and we're going to compare it from national sample, the whole country, versus DC. All right? And like I said, we're going to start probably looking at, that's really only one small section. When we add that to what we always track, Biden's approval ratings, vaccination status, and also we're going to keep trustworthiness in there. I want to continue to ask how much trust people have in the safety. I want to track that now. We didn't track that from the beginning. I want to track it now. And then the registered voter economic confidence index, right? And then of course our social desirability bias indicators. All of that gets tracked. We can take out whatever else was in the survey before, replace that with this, with the January 6th issue, and probably throw a few other things in there. I think we have room to do that. So the only way to find out is to, this weekend, go to locals, start chopping up the old survey questionnaire, keep in place the trackers, remove everything else. We'll add what we just talked about, and then we'll see what we have room for after we run the analysis on the questionnaire to see, as you know, fatigue score, accessibility, and everything else. Looks like producers over there trying to get my attention. So what's up?
Oh no, I was just trying to fix the camera.
Oh, you should go. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
People don't care.
I just didn't like the framing because I had it framed for Bannon. And
Right. Right.
And then when it came to you, it didn't.
Yeah, listen, guys. If you didn't see my appearance on War Room, go check that out. I do want to just again reiterate. That's Heart Research and Public Opinion Strategies. I think POS. Get it? POS. They're Heart Strategies, the Democratic pollster. And then POS is the Republican pollster. And I guarantee you they're not Republican in the sense that you think you are Republican if you're a viewer of this, But in any event, the bottom line is that reporting, that level of transparency or lack thereof should no longer be acceptable. And I can't believe after 2020, when even APOR came out, even though it was another whitewash report, when even APOR came out and said this was the biggest blunder in 40 years. In fact, if you take out the pollsters they love to hate, it was the biggest blunder since Truman Dewey. All right, but when we look at articles that report public polling results, this has to stop. That specific example, and they're not alone, but they didn't even give basic standards of disclosure required by APOR. So where is APOR? Where is the American Association of Public Opinion Research to say that's unacceptable? Now nobody, except for a few of us, we do it. Emerson at Spencer at Emerson College, I believe he does it. Really should be. The APOR should be demanding everybody follow the Transparency Initiative. Checklists, with everything on it. But, okay, I surveyed 800 and something voters nationwide, and this is what we got for the month. That's not good enough anymore. And this is the stuff that is killing our industry. When I see a survey, national survey, that is less than half of what we require to conduct a national survey. We have minimum sample guidelines. State of Florida, X number, must have. State of Michigan, X number, must have. Nationally, X number, must have. And when I see a survey that is less than half of our minimum sample guideline requirements, and they don't tell us anything about how they collected those responses, it's not just suspect. It pisses me off. How did you talk to them? Did you call these people on the phone? Did you email them? Did you text them? If you called them on the phone, was it a landline? Was it a cell phone? They specifically cite an age group, 18 to 35, said this month. The one bright spot is this, and really among 18 to 35s. Really? What was your subsample sampling error? How many 18 to 35-year-olds did you talk to? What was the sampling error for that subgroup? How many men and women of that subgroup did you talk to? How many whites? How many black? What the hell is this? Like I said, the Biden approve +2 or the Trump ahead +3 is over. That's over. Nobody believes us anymore. The only way to earn that trust back, we got to do better than that. This is the stuff that is killing us in this industry. Some Republican pairing with some liberal in an attempt to make it look like it's bipartisan and credible, that's not good enough. Fox News already tried that model, in case you haven't been paying attention. They're among the worst polls out there. It's not good enough anymore, and nobody should tolerate it. I love how they throw out, myself and others from their cute little indexes and their cute little aggregations and their cute little averages, but they tolerate something that is a violation of basic ethics. Basic. Like I said, that's not even the minimum standard of disclosure. Forget about making a good faith attempt to comply with higher standards of disclosure like the Transparency Initiative. Forget about that. Give us the basic, for crying out loud. Where are the crosstabs? You don't even release crosstabs? Folks, do you understand what I'm telling you? They could have just made that up. How the hell would we know? Why? Because it's Hart Research? Hart Research once called my house and asked specifically for my wife in what they reported for NBC to be a randomized poll, right? Mm-hmm. Randomized, live caller, the gold standard. Yet I picked up the phone and they specifically asked to speak to my wife, and then a woman with a very specific accent, which I won't get into it, proceeded to shame my wife for her responses. So don't give me this crap, which she proceeded to shame back, pound. So don't give me this crap about, it's Hart Research and some people we just trust. Give me a break. CNBC didn't poll the election well either. So now we're supposed to believe polls that don't even have basic standards of disclosure? Kiss my people's pundit
cheeks.
Pucker up, sister. All right, we'll be back.
She'll bend over for the test.
We'll be back in 2 minutes and 40 seconds with Don Smith. I want to hear what he has to say about Andrew Cuomo. Mm-hmm. Hang tight, folks. Hang tight.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you aggressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a night. So give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna
Blah, 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 blah. Now they can hear it. They can hear it now.
Yeah, well, you messed with something.
I don't know.
Yeah,
See?
there
There it is. There's the test.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
But it may be a little bit, listen, the audio may be a little bit delayed because this isn't right. It's something on here. It's something on here. I don't know what it is, but did I get up and knock something out with my foot or something?
That's what I was looking for.
I don't, because that
deleted
makes
that
no
one screen
sense.
and then everything went haywire.
Yeah, that had to be deleted. That had to go. Yeah, so did you guys hear the answer to the Arizona audit? Because I'm sure they're still there. If not, let me watch what you guys have to say. Yeah, you should be able to hear again, even though it's probably not as good as quality.
But it'll do.
Yeah, it sounds like radio, right? Yeah, I'm sure it does. You didn't hear the Arizona audit. Okay. So, look, okay, let's circle back here. The Arizona audit, the power or the authority of the state legislature to order an audit and see it as see it out or conduct it as it sees fit is affirmed by the courts. Maricopa is just deciding not to comply with lawful subpoenas. There is no good answer to this question. There is no good answer to this question. The bottom line is, folks, is that Republican subpoenas simply don't have the power that Democratic subpoenas have, because Democrats they'll have the media screaming about how lawless Republicans are being, how it's a threat to the Constitution and the very fabric of democracy. Republicans won't obey the subpoenas, so then basically everything's going to come crashing down, the sky's going to fall. Not only does that not happen when you have Democrats make a lawless decision like this, along with, by the way, the CDC and the Biden administration simply not listening to what was very clear from the Supreme Court, that they do not have the power to enact unilateral moratoriums on rent moratoriums, and they just don't have that. They don't have the power to tell landlords you can't evict somebody. The eviction moratorium is unconstitutional. Whether you agree with it or not, has to be done by the legislature. The answer is not a good answer. It's not an answer you want to hear, which is that Republicans are going to have to do something if they want to force these people to comply. There has to be some teeth to their threats. You can't issue a subpoena unless you're willing to send a law enforcement official to the Maricopa Board of Elections to arrest them. Because if you don't comply with a subpoena, and I don't comply with a subpoena, we get arrested. If Republicans didn't comply with one of Adam Schiff's subpoenas, he would have sent the Sergeant at Arms down to go arrest them. So there's no good answer if you are somebody who supported this audit. There just is no good answer for you. And I'm sorry I don't have a good one. Their rules are different for everybody. And that is sadly, that's it. That's sadly the answer. Hey, Laura, I did lose where your questions were. You had questions written. Now all I see is the questions on YouTube. And I know you got this going on, but yeah, I don't know what happened with it. It disappeared. But let me take this opportunity, though, to tell Don you could, I hope I'll be able to hear Don, though. That's the problem. I very much hope I'll be able to hear him. There we go. I turned on monitor, and I will be able to. So, Don, if you still got the time to join, let's go ahead and do that. And I'll add, I'm gonna sound like the radio to you, probably, buddy. It's gonna sound like FM over here until I figure it out. And while Don's answering some questions, I'll play around with it to see if I can figure it out. But in the meantime, I can't. Oh, I have to reconnect it. My fault, Don. My fault. All right, buddy. Can you hear me? He can't hear me.
How come he can't hear you?
I don't know. He can't hear me.